Long ago, in a time before towering skyscrapers and bustling cities, the world was made up of small villages and tight-knit communities. The heart of each village was not just its people, but the work they did. The rhythm of their lives was set by the trades they had mastered, trades passed down from father to son, from mother to daughter, through generations. Among them were the blacksmiths, bakers, weavers, and farmers, the unsung heroes of daily life, whose hands shaped the world as we know it. Our journey begins at the forge of a blacksmith, the one who was often seen as the backbone of the community. His day started long before dawn. As the village slept, he would already be at his anvil, coaxing fire from his coals, the glow of molten iron lighting up the dim, early hours. His job was both physically demanding and vital to survival. It wasn't just swords for knights or armor for soldiers that he crafted. It was also the plowshares for farmers, nails for carpenters, and tools for everyday use. His work had a touch of magic to it, taking something as hard and unyielding as iron and transforming it bit by bit into a weapon or tool that would make life just a little easier. One day, a young blacksmith, eager to prove his worth, took on a daunting task. The village had called for a new gate to protect their lands, and it had to be strong enough to withstand the fiercest storm and the harshest attack. As he worked, sweat beading on his brow, the village gathered to watch. For days, he hammered and shaped, carefully cooling the metal to just the right temperature, until finally, the gate was complete, a symbol of his skill and strength. The gate stood tall for generations, a reminder of the blacksmith's craft and the pride he took in his work. But farming wasn't all about food. Some farmers raised sheep and cattle, and the wool from those sheep went straight into the hands of the weavers, another essential craft. In a small, dimly lit cottage at the edge of the village, the weavers worked tirelessly at their looms. Their fingers moved quickly, pulling thread over thread, creating patterns as intricate as the stars in the sky. Their cloth was used for everything: clothing, blankets, even trade with other villages. One young weaver, determined to create something truly extraordinary, decided to weave a tapestry that would tell the story of the village. She spent weeks collecting the finest wool and dyes, mixing colors as vibrant as the fields in spring and as deep as the night sky. Her hands flew across the loom, each thread telling a part of the village's history. The blacksmith at his forge, the baker with his loaves, the farmer in her golden fields. When she was done, the tapestry was hung in the village square, and it became a symbol of their unity, their struggles, and their triumphs. As we step back from this small village, we see that these occupations, though humble, were the very lifeblood of the community. Each job was interconnected. Without the blacksmith's tools, the farmer couldn't work the fields. Without the baker's bread, the villagers would go hungry. Without the weaver's cloth, they would shiver in the cold winter months. These trades weren't just jobs, they were lifelines, woven into the fabric of everyday life. As time passed, technology advanced. The roles of the blacksmith, the baker, the farmer, and the weaver evolved. Machines replaced hands and factories replaced cottages. But the spirit of these trades lives on. In modern times, we may not rely on a village blacksmith for our tools or a weaver for our clothes, but the essence of their work remains with us. The farmers still feed the world. The bakers still nourish us, and the craftsmen and women of today continue to shape our lives with their hands and their hearts. But the blacksmith wasn't the only one whose work was central to the community. In the cool early mornings, as the blacksmith's hammer rang through the village, the baker's oven was already burning hot. Bread, the most basic of foods, was the cornerstone of every meal. The baker, like the blacksmith, had a craft that was almost like a form of art. Each loaf was mixed, kneaded, and shaped by hand. There were no machines to help, just the baker's fingers and the feel of the dough beneath them. Each day, the villagers would line up to buy their fresh bread, the smell of yeast and flour filling the air. But one day, disaster struck. A fire raged through the village, and the bakery was lost. The baker, heartbroken, had lost not only his livelihood, but the oven his father had built. But he did not give up. With the help of the village, a new oven was built, and from the ashes, a new bakery rose. The baker returned to his craft, knowing that his bread was more than just food. It was a symbol of hope and resilience for his people. Meanwhile, as the village bustled with the sound of the blacksmith's hammer and the aroma of fresh bread, the farmers were hard at work in the fields, the true backbone of survival. They woke before the first light of dawn, guiding their oxen through the dew-soaked fields. Farming was a year-round job, a life tied to the cycles of nature. In spring, the fields had to be plowed and the seeds sown. In summer, the crops grew under the sun's watchful eye. And in autumn, the harvest was gathered, a time of both great joy and great labor. One farmer in particular stood out among the rest. She had a knack for growing the best wheat in the village. Her fields were golden and tall, and every year her harvest was plentiful. But one year the rains didn't come. The sun beat down on the land and the soil dried up. The villagers feared the worst, but the farmer, wise beyond her years, remembered a technique her grandmother had taught her. She dug deep trenches around her crops, trapping what little water there was and saving her fields from the worst of the drought. When the harvest came, it wasn't as bountiful as before, but it was enough to feed the village through the winter. Her knowledge of the land had saved them, and the villagers never forgot her ingenuity. And so the story of our ancestors' occupations is not just a tale of the past, but a reminder of the resilience, skill, and unity that built the world we live in today. From blacksmiths to bakers, farmers to weavers, their legacy endures, reminding us that, at the core of every society, are the people who work with their hands, shaping not just materials but the future. Certainly. Let's create a new and expanded version of the story that incorporates additional points and perspectives while exploring the ancestral occupations in a fresh way. From blacksmiths to bakers, the jobs of our ancestors. Imagine a world without modern technology, where survival depended entirely on the skills passed down through generations. In such times, the heartbeat of every village came from the hands of its workers, each person having a role to play in the delicate balance of survival. Their jobs weren't just occupations, they were lifelines, sustaining entire communities. The story of our ancestors is one of blacksmiths, bakers, farmers, weavers, and more, all of whom played crucial roles in shaping the lives we lead today. The blacksmith, master of metal and fire. Every morning before dawn broke, the blacksmith's workshop was already alive with the sounds of hammering metal. The blacksmith wasn't just any tradesman, he was the lifeblood of the village's productivity. With fire roaring and iron glowing, he transformed raw materials into essential tools, everything from plows for farmers to horseshoes for traders. But beyond the hammer and anvil, the blacksmith was a figure of innovation. In times of war, his role became even more significant as he forged weapons to defend the village. Every blade, axe, and shield he created was a promise of protection. Villagers revered the blacksmith for his skills, knowing that in his hands, the very fate of the community might rest. One legend tells of a particularly skilled blacksmith who crafted a blade so fine it was said to cut through iron like butter. Word of his craftsmanship spread far and wide, and his knowledge of metallurgy became a tightly guarded secret. His skill wasn't just in shaping metal, but in reading it, knowing precisely how hot to heat the iron, how many times to fold the steel, and how to harden it to perfection. His legacy lived on, as blacksmithing became one of the oldest, most respected trades across civilizations. The baker, nourishment for the body and soul. As the blacksmith hammered away, another essential figure was busy in the heart of the village, the baker. Rising before the sun, the baker kneaded dough and stoked the fires of his oven. Bread was more than food in those days. It was a symbol of life, warmth, and community. In many villages, the bakery was a social hub. Families gathered to collect freshly baked loaves, exchanging news and sharing stories. Bread sustained the villagers physically, but it also created a sense of unity. Without the baker, people went hungry, and morale waned. There's a tale from a northern village where a baker became a hero. During a harsh winter, when crops had failed and food was scarce, the villagers turned to him. Using the last of his grain and some wild herbs, the baker crafted a simple but hearty bread that kept the village alive through the cold months. His skill and selflessness reminded everyone that survival wasn't just about strength, it was about community. The farmer. Steward of the land, at the heart of every village was the farmer, the one who truly understood the rhythm of the earth. The farmer's life was dictated by the seasons, and their success was directly tied to the bounty of the land. If the crops failed, the village suffered. If they thrived, the village celebrated. Farming, though it seems straightforward, required incredible knowledge. Farmers knew when to sow seeds, how to irrigate their fields, and how to rotate crops to keep the soil fertile. They worked hand in hand with nature, not only feeding the village but teaching others the value of patience and persistence. They respected the land, often seeing it as a gift from the god. There's a story of an ancient farming village where the farmers discovered a technique of crop rotation that allowed them to grow wheat and barley year-round, ensuring they never went hungry. This discovery transformed their community from a struggling settlement into a prosperous one, attracting traders and travelers from afar. The farmer's role wasn't just to grow food, it was to cultivate prosperity. The weaver, creator of cloth and culture. While farmers toiled in the fields and blacksmiths shaped metal, the weaver sat by the loom, weaving threads of wool, cotton, or flax into fabrics that clothed the village. But weaving wasn't just about practicality. In many cultures, it was an art form, and the patterns woven into cloth told stories. Stories of gods, of ancestors, of triumphs, and losses. The weaver's craft was delicate yet powerful. Every thread represented connection. Between people, between generations, and between cultures. A weaver might spend weeks crafting a single piece of cloth, knowing that it would be passed down as an heirloom or used in an important trade. In one ancient culture, weaving was considered sacred. The patterns on the cloth were thought to hold spiritual meaning, protecting those who wore it. The weaver was seen as a spiritual guide, someone who could interpret the invisible threads of life and fate, weaving them into something tangible. As a result, weavers often held a place of honor, their skills respected and their cloth cherished. The fishermen, harvesting from the waters. Beyond the fields and forges, another essential role was that of the fishermen. For coastal villages, the sea was both a provider and a challenge. Fishermen braved the unpredictable waters to bring back fish that fed their families and the village. They were experts in the tides, in reading the skies and understanding the behavior of the fish. Fishing was not without danger. Storms could appear without warning, and many fishermen lost their lives at sea. Yet the job was vital, and communities depended on their courage. One old story tells of a fisherman who, during a particularly harsh storm, was swept out to sea. Thought to be lost, he returned days later, carrying an extraordinary catch that saved the village from famine. His bravery and connection to the ocean became the stuff of legend, passed down through generations. In one ancient culture, weaving was considered sacred. The patterns on the cloth were thought to hold spiritual meaning, protecting those who wore it. The weaver was seen as a spiritual guide, someone who could interpret the invisible threads of life and fate, weaving them into something tangible. As a result, weavers often held a place of honor, their skills respected, and their cloth cherished. The fishermen. Harvesting from the waters beyond the fields and forges, another essential role was that of the fishermen. For coastal villages, the sea was both a provider and a challenge. Fishermen braved the unpredictable waters to bring back fish that fed their families and the village. They were experts in the tides, in reading the skies, and understanding the behavior of the fish. Fishing was not without danger. Storms could appear without warning, and many fishermen lost their lives at sea. Yet the job was vital, and communities depended on their courage. One old story tells of a fisherman who, during a particularly harsh storm, was swept out to sea. Thought to be lost, he returned days later, carrying an extraordinary catch that saved the village from famine. His bravery and connection to the ocean became the stuff of legend, passed down through generations. The carpenter. Building a legacy of wood last, but not least was the carpenter, the one who shaped wood into homes, barns, tools, and furniture. Carpenters didn't just work with wood, they worked with dreams. They built the spaces where families lived, where children were born, and where people gathered to celebrate and mourn. A good carpenter was revered, for they didn't just build structures, they built legacies. A famous tale from an ancient village speaks of a carpenter who designed and constructed a hall so magnificent that it became the center of all village life. The beams were so perfectly carved, the joints so carefully aligned, that it stood for centuries, weathering storms and the passage of time. The carpenter's ability to blend function with beauty created a space where generations gathered, marking important moments. The hidden legacy. Though many of these trades have evolved or faded with time, their legacies remain alive in our modern world. Today, we often take for granted the conveniences brought by machinery and technology, forgetting that everything we have was once crafted by hand. The blacksmith's anvil, the baker's oven, the farmer's field, and the weaver's loom were not just tools. They were symbols of human ingenuity and perseverance. In today's world, artisans continue to carry on these ancestral traditions, often reviving forgotten techniques. In small towns and cities alike, blacksmiths still craft ironwork, bakers still hand-make bread, and weavers still create textiles. These modern artisans honor the memory of their ancestors, reminding us all that, though the tools may have changed, the spirit of craftsmanship has endured. As we reflect on these ancient trades, we are reminded of the deep connection between the work of our hands and the survival of our communities. From blacksmiths to bakers, from fishermen to farmers, our ancestors laid the foundation for the world we live in today, a world built on the sweat, skill, and determination of those who came before.